I'm
love
dealing
it.
with.
This is the best
Okay.
energy.
So now we are recording. So everybody, welcome back to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live. And it is Sunday, which means Kristen and I'm Mary Fran Bontempo with Kristen Smedley. We are doing our faith episode. And we have a wonderful, wonderful guest. This lady is amazing. I met her and I'm using air quotes because it was always a virtual meeting. Through a podcast, her podcast, The Great Girlfriends. Her name is Sybil Amuti. And Sybil, I just want to tell you a couple things about her, and I only have to keep it to a couple because if I told you everything about her, we wouldn't have time to talk to her. So Sybil is, she's a brand strategist. She is a podcast host, a philanthropist, coach, wife, mother, holds a BS in Urban Studies from Dillard University and MS in Urban Planning from Columbia University. Born and raised in Memphis, but a New York transplant. So she is in the middle of all of this stuff in New York right now. And so that's tough stuff. But Sybil has worked with so many different companies with brand strategy, and she has her partner on the Great Girlfriends podcast, which is where she and I met. I was fortunate enough to be a guest on that show. And as you can imagine from the title, it is about building community with women. And the other reason that I wanted Sybil on tonight is because she's also the creator and executive producer of the Grace podcast, which is dedicated to providing practical spiritual development for Christian women. And she's also the founder of Brave, a growth circle for women in fostering mentorship and one-on-one development. So, Sybil, thank you for joining us.
Hi.
This is great.
I'm so glad to be here. I am, and we have had a virtual meet, right? So we never officially met, but in our time together, I really felt like I got a sense of so much of you. So I'm so glad when you emailed, I was like, of course, whatever day I'll figure it out. So great to meet both of you.
Well,
Hi,
we're
Kristen.
delighted. We are delighted to have you here.
Yeah, we're glad you could fit us in. I mean, if anyone out there on Facebook is thinking like, oh, I'm really busy. No, you're not.
Yeah. It's 8:00 on a Sunday night and we're doing this. So y'all can do it. We're doing
That's
it.
Right.
We're doing
That's
it.
Right.
So Sybil, tell us a little bit about, I want to talk about the Great Girlfriends podcast because that was how I first met you. And quite honestly, the concept and the feeling behind that, there's a measure of faith that runs through that too. I mean, it's not specifically your faith podcast, but there is an element of that. And I felt that the first time I met you.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. So the Great Girlfriends is a podcast that I launched in 2015 with a co-partner, Brandis Daniel, who is one of my amazing girlfriends. And it was built off the back of what we consider it was almost like a friendship joyride. You know, we met, we found our synergy, and we just continued to ride the wave. And that's sort of how things kind of work with me was, you know, we'll just take things where they go, as far as they go, as long as they can, and see what can be built along the way. And so off the back of that whole theory of what can we build together if we really want to, after, I want to say it's roughly 7 years of friendship, we decided to jump into a podcast. And the reasoning behind it was because I was in a place in my career where I felt like I wasn't really connecting as much as I wanted to the people that matter to me. So I was doing a lot of work on one level, but I felt like I wasn't touching the ground. And it really started to kind of weaken my impact because, you know, I really, really love connecting with people, specifically women, to find out where their heartbeat is and what matters to them. And so it was something that it was a God thing, literally placed on my heart that there needed to be a conversation or a practical way that I could just connect with women and give tips and things that I've learned that another woman might need to learn along the way. I figure if I've stomped my foot 1,000 times and bumped my head and made a ton of mistakes and had a ton of wins, then somebody along the way will need to kind of keep themselves from falling or get a little more leverage on their journey. So with that note, we decided, let's launch the podcast. The Great Girlfriends, the name, was simply because I feel like all of my friendships are supercharged. I just think that they are, I don't know, they're electrifying. They're fun. They're dynamic. They challenge me. You know, I'm comfortable. I'm safe. I'm stimulated all at once. And so I felt like regular girlfriends just weren't enough. You need to have great girlfriends. You need, if you could have, if you could have a regular girlfriend, a good girlfriend, or a great girlfriend, wouldn't you want
Why
the
wouldn't
great
you pick
girlfriend?
the great one? Of course you would pick the great one. That just makes perfect sense. Of course you would do it that way.
So I figure, well, that's how we'll do. Well, great girlfriend sounds much better, and ultimately you want to try to get the most out of your relationships. And that was the build. And we started from the house with no knowledge of anything, just my desire to reach women, Brandis's desire to reach women, the idea to build a brand. I'm very versed at building brands. So I said, okay, let's start with what we have. And we started, and we sent an email out to each one of us, picked 25 friends and said, hey, we're starting something, we've recorded 3 episodes. Would you mind sharing? And they shared, and they continued to share. And through word of mouth, which we all know is still number one means of communicating anything you want communicated.
Oh, for sure. Especially with women.
Especially with women.
Put the word out there and it's going.
Put the word out and say, don't tell. And they're like, and there it just began. And the first month there were like 1,500 downloads, and we were panicking and panting, like, who are these people listening? Are we being, are people like, are they hitting the wrong button? And they just continued to listen because we didn't think that we didn't understand that the world could listen in with a podcast. We knew it, but we didn't think that they would. I think we thought that it would just be friends and family, because who would want to listen to us? They don't know us. Who's going to want to listen? We're not Oprah. Like, how's this going to work? But we hit at a time where in the podcast community, there were a lot of male voices, specifically white male voices, and the voices were very sterile and they were very technical. And, we just came on with big laughs and a lot of conversation and connection, and just like a thread that I think people were looking for. And so that's the build. That's the beginning of it. That's how it started.
Well, the thing that struck me the most about you both when I was lucky enough to be a guest on your show was just there's just a genuine energy about the show, about you, about Brandis. I mean, it just carried through right away. So I think I'm quite sure that your audience picked up on that too.
I hope so.
Yeah, if it's gone so far, and it's still going and people are downloading all, then you are having quite the Isn't that funny though? Because Mary Fran and I were like that when we did the live event. We're like, all right, maybe it's just going to be all our family that comes, all the people we know. And then when we were like, all right, well, maybe it's just going to be like, they'll at least nod their heads for us because they know a lot of them know us and they'll like us. And then when we were standing, we took a break, and when we were talking, and we're like, did you see like people really love what we're
people
saying?
were paying attention. It was like,
what? Who is that actress? They like me.
Yeah, they liked us. They really liked us.
They really liked you.
That feeling is extraordinary, isn't it?
It really is.
Know that it's like, and it's like coming through you, and it's like, oh, all that crap I've been through is finally
it's worth something.
It is. It is. You take that
something.
experience and then you recognize, and we've said before, and I'm sure that you're a believer in this too. When you have these experiences that are such challenges and really tough on you, you can sit on it yourself, but then it's just your pain. Then it's just your experience. But when you take it outside and you share it with other people, and you say exactly what you said about, okay, I've stubbed my toe on this a million times and I banged my head, so here's what I learned. Maybe this will help you. And that just gives it a power so far beyond your own, personal experience.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time we want to trash it, right? So when things go south, we want to pretend it never happened. We want to walk away, and we just want to move forward and neglect all the lessons and the growth that came from that. And many moons ago, I learned to celebrate myself and go, wait, you made it through that? Like, wait a minute.
Yeah, you're right. Because we often
instead
just want to.
You went through it. Yeah, like you made it through that. Instead of it being that happened to you. No, I made it through that thing. And so I started to kind of switch the perspective for myself, because I needed to feel good about myself at the end of, bad decisions or bad relationships, or like, you know what, that choice didn't take you out. So it really did for me. I'm like, what's the lesson? What's the growth point? And why not share it? I'm clearly not the only woman who's had horrible relationships. I'm not the only one who's ever been in debt. I'm not the only one who's, you know, had to leave a job or gotten fired. We're not the only ones, you know?
Yeah, and it just builds so much strength, and it builds community too, you know, which at this point is something that we certainly all need. So I wanted to switch a little bit to the other thing that has always struck me about you is your willingness to talk about your faith in a very public way. You know, a lot of people who are successful entrepreneurs, because there's a certain amount of smoke and mirrors that go along with building an image and a brand, as you well know. You know, you create what you want people to see, but so that's what people show. They don't always show something as personal as a faith, but you've done that. So how did you start to decide that was something that you wanted people to know about you?
That's such a great question. You know, I work in the brand world, and building a brand is about identity, and it's about authenticity. And again, like you say, perception is reality. So it's about what you want people to know as your reality. And I cannot effectively in brand building be honest about other people's brands without sharing the root of my own brand and the root of my own identity. And it is my faith. And I feel that I would be negligent to my lifeline if I weren't honest in saying it's because of God that I literally am living, moving, breathing in this really graceful stage of my life. It wasn't always that way that I recognized or could give honor, you know, in my faith, because I was in point like, well, how are people going to judge me? How are they going to feel? But once I got released from the idea that their perception of me was greater than my relationship with God, I began to feel liberated. And I just decided that if there were one voice that we're gonna, you know, make God's name known, it'll be mine. And I'm cool with being the Christian girl. I'm cool with being the girl who loves God. I'm cool with being the girl who's got values. And then I ask people, if you want to know about my fruit, then you've got to understand where I'm rooted. You cannot recognize or honor any of the fruit in my life without knowing my source, right? It just doesn't even make sense. So anytime someone wants to give credit for anything that may look, air quotes, look nice, like being a mom or whatever, marriage, whatever, all the things, then I've got to point back to if it were not for God, I would not have a great relationship with my husband. I wouldn't even want to be a mom. There's so many parts of my life that are because of my faith. So it is that thing where in building a brand, you always want to be authentic. You always want to bring forward an honest and intentional brand, especially when it is, which every brand is people-based, but specifically when your product, good, or service is community and it is connection with people. I can only be myself, and you can only be yourself, and Kristen, you can only be yourself, and whatever that is. And those are the tentacles of connection for other people. So for me, I'm like faith first, and then if people fall off from there, I'm okay with that. I'm also a respecter of other people who share their faith. Whatever your faith is, I'm a respecter of people's faith. And then if people have to fall off as a result of that disconnect, it's okay. But I also believe in quality, in refining your audience and refining your connections to get to the people that really want to be with you.
Yeah, I like that. A couple of years ago when I did my TED Talk, the coach that I hired to help me put that together, it was actually probably the worst sucker punches of my whole life that time. It's just the worst time to decide that a TED Talk an opportunity fell in my lap, which ended up saving me actually, because I had to laser focus on getting that ready, right? And I was talking about the moment I wanted to put into it about my moment of surrender with my first son's blindness diagnosis, and I was pregnant with my second son. And that was the pivotal moment in my entire life when I surrendered and saw that my son was not hurting from blindness. I was, and I was so angry, at God for 3 years, and then it changed everything. And I was like, but I don't see a lot of TED Talks talking about moments of surrender and all. She's like, that is where this whole trajectory started. So we got to figure out a way to get in it. I can't tell you how many, that was the part I was most nervous about, which is far now because whatever, but I can't tell you how many moms reached out to me. And I felt like, I was saying, I was so upset. Like, how could God do this to me? What did I ever do to deserve this? Right. And I thought, but that's really what I thought. And then I recovered and I was different, and had this beautiful life. And so many women reached out to me and said they had the same conversation. Of course, mine was a massive tantrum. And they felt so much shame about that they thought that they were horrible Christians, how could they say something like that? And then there's me on the stage in New York City going, guess what I did,
Yeah.
And it's okay,
Yeah.
But
that's the thing, isn't it?
Connections that way.
That's the truth about relationship, right? I don't think we're supposed to be perfect in the relationship. First of all, in any relationship, we're supposed to be honest. So if we're going to have two-way dialogue with God, or even be in a relationship, then we got to be able to share our heart one to another. It doesn't matter how perfect God's heart is. We still need to be able to share our imperfections so that we can get back something that's pure, that's holy, that's useful, right? But I think that people forget that he's after our heart. No matter what's in there, he just wants the heart, So I celebrate that. We have to be transparent.
Yeah, I do now too, because I feel like that's where it's like he's waiting for you to just break down and give it all to,
Yeah.
And you can come up from that.
Yeah.
I always say, look, you made this. You made me the way I am.
Yes.
So you have a part in this, so you're just going to have to take it the way it's coming out. That's all there is to it. I can't help myself.
Yes. And you know me. So you already know my perspective.
Right. So exactly. You know that my heart is good, even though what's coming out of here might not always be putting in the nicest terms.
But I love you enough to be honest with you, right? Like, I love you enough I don't want anything separating us. Not a facade, not my fear of God's judgment. Any of that. I don't want any of that. I don't want that. So yeah, I love that, Kristen.
That is just, to be able to, people feel like they have to script their conversations with God and to make sure they're saying it in the right way. And I mean, I was a kid, Kristen went to Catholic school, I went to Catholic school, you had the prayers that you memorized and all that kind of stuff. And they told you could talk to God however you wanted, but they didn't really mean that.
No. Yeah. Nor do they show you.
Exactly. Like, well, how do I do that? How am I supposed to do that? Well, now he gets it all, sorry. But I love the way you imbue your work with faith, whether it's even named or not. Like you had said earlier, when you talked about starting the Great Girlfriends, and I think Kristen and I can relate to this. You went into it without knowing where it was going to go and just went with the evolution. And that is faith.
That's faith, completely.
That's just going for it and going, okay, I don't know what's going to happen next, but you're putting this idea in my head and heart.
Yeah.
And you won't let it go. Like, that's one of those things that you have to act on.
Yeah.
And then you went with that.
I mean, my marriage is the same way. My motherhood.
Right? Well, that's the biggest leap of faith, that one.
Every single relationship, I think what happened with me, and I think I may have shared this story with you before, but in 1997, after I'd gone through a sexual assault, and it took the wind out of me, right? Like, I was very young in college, gone through an experience, had no idea what had even happened to me. And it forced me, not it forced me, but I then went into denial and heavy excessive drinking. And then at that point I was suicidal. I was depressed for 3 years and no one knew. When I came out of that because I literally, and this is my absolute first time, I think, hearing the voice of God for myself, heard God telling me to give him a try. And in my head, I was like, well, you had all these years and look what happened. And he's like, that wasn't me. Like, give me a try. So that was the beginning of relationship. And in that beginning of that relationship was where I began to journey and walk and create experiences along the way, day by day, picking up new experiences that were just amazing, ways that I could see God that I had never noticed, like nature, just the creation, the beauty of creation, birds and, trees and air and clouds, things that have been there, right? But my new eyes, this was life for me. This was a resurrection. This was a new space for me. And that was, I think, also the framework for how I began relating with people, because I started to experience, I learned grace I would say in my 20s, is when I began to learn grace and understand how to walk in grace. And I didn't know that's what it was. But by the time I met my husband, it was the same thing. The model had been built just like my relationship with God. I don't know what's next. I'm okay with not knowing what's next now. Back then, before, God had full control, I was planning the next, right? I was in control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's not life. That's not real life. So the surrenderance offered me another level of connection that I didn't know. And now from God, then my husband, and all these new friendships that were birthed, where I was deathly afraid to be a friend to anyone because I thought I was so broken. And then I realized, wait, other people go through things too. Oh, are you serious? I'm not the only girl in the world that's been through sexual assault and that wanted to kill herself and was an alcoholic, all these things. I understood more about God's grace, and I just began to journey differently. Just journey, take a step. How far can that step take you? Take the next step, not plan to the end of time, because there will be things that will come, good and bad and ugly, but you'll still need to take a step. And I think that relationship with God was the model, and it gave me permission to not expect the world out of people. Can we have dinner?
Yeah.
Let's just have,
exactly. Right.
And then maybe go to the park after, or maybe we'll call each other, but let's not expect so much that we can't enjoy what's right in front of us, right? Which is today, the life we have right now.
I use that analogy when I speak to groups about getting in a car at night, turning on the headlights, and you can see about 200 feet or whatever in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't not drive because you can't see beyond that.
Yeah.
You drive that distance, and then you drive that next distance, and then you drive that next distance. But there's a measure, and there's a measure of, I think, freedom in that. Isn't there a measure of freedom in saying, okay, God, look, you got to take this. I'm willing to do the work, but you got to be, see right here, right next to me, right here. Right here.
Yes.
Because I am not doing this by myself.
No. But I'm a wreck by myself.
I know, right?
I tried it.
Nobody needs to see this. Right. Nobody needs to see this by myself. Nobody. But there's a freedom in having that force to rely on, to just go, okay, now what do you want me to do? And just be quiet and wait.
Absolutely. I think what I learned too was that, because I at one point wanted my life taken from me. I wanted to take it. I wanted it taken. It wasn't taken. I couldn't take it. And I understand now the gift of life, because I realized that if that had happened for me in 1999, I would not be sitting here with two beautiful women that I have the privilege of connecting with today through my relationship with God, right? And so I wouldn't have a husband. I wouldn't have my children. I wouldn't have a great girlfriend community and so many other valuable things that I just cannot believe I would have been willing to give away because of a circumstance that I wasn't even responsible for. So I think I've learned the gift of life, and just to appreciate the moments and not expect everything to look like this plan that only includes my perspective, only includes my boundaries, my hopes, my desires, and doesn't make room for other people to plant their perspective, their touch, their grace, their story. I've decided I want it all, and I'm just here to enjoy it and cross my bridges, help other people cross. I don't want to fight anymore. I don't want to war. I don't want to offer that to the world, because what we give today is our offer to the world. What you give, Mary Fran, what you give, Kristen, what I give, that's our gift to the world. So we need to wake up and recognize that in every moment we're gifting. It's a choice. We can either gift people a lot of negativity, anger, unforgiveness, hostility, rejection, cliques and division, or we can be light, we can be joy, we can gift peace. Because what I offer you is what you take from me, right? You'll take this from me and you may use it for something else. So we have to be very conscious of the idea that life is a gift. Therefore, what we give is a gift, and we're inviting others to participate in our gift. every moment, not even, even in parenting, when I want to just, you want to just, I'm a middle schooler and a third grader. I step back. I have to take a step back. I got to breathe. I got to do deep breathing. Before I just give them all these things that I really want to give them. And I'm not perfect, right? So sometimes I take those steps, but I have to recognize that I'm in control of that. I can't control everything. Yeah. We can't control it all, but we can control what we offer. So with that, it's really changed my world. It really has.
I love that. I love that because, everything that you just said, and I want to take that whole thing, that whole section, and just keep sending that out there, because when you're saying that you were at that most broken part and not wanting to even be here anymore, and then look where your life went, and so many people are there right. I mean, like billions are there right now. That I've never seen that this was going to happen. That so many people are at the bottom of their pit right now, and the message that you're giving to them, to say that when it looks so bad, everything is falling apart. But if you hang in there and hang in there in faith, because that was me. I was so in the pit. I was like, I don't even know I got nothing now. So, and somebody from my church called and said that there was a Max Lucado group. You'll get through this. And I went and did that study, not even knowing what it was I was just like, I was at my wit's end and needed Wednesday nights to have 2 hours of something positive. And that's what started pulling me out of that pit. When I think that was just 3 years ago.
Wow.
Where I was 3 years ago to where I am now, and being who I was supposed to be, and all these things are happening. And you're saying the exact same thing. You just got to hang in there and have that faith, tap into that somehow.
That's right.
And turn it over. I think, and turn it over. And when that's exactly the point at which you have to turn it over, when you have nothing left of your own.
Yeah. I think too, I had to ask the question, what are you fighting for? I wanted to believe God. I really did. And every model of males or men in my life were positive. So I didn't want the circumstances that were pressed against me to distort everything that I knew was true. I really wanted to fight for what I knew was possible. And a lot of times we're fighting and we really don't know what we're fighting for. So we stay in the fight, and a lot of times we turn those fists on ourselves because we haven't figured out what we're fighting for. And if you believe, just 1 ounce of hope is all you need. All I needed some days was just to sit outside and enjoy the stillness that I'd never experienced in my entire life. And just see how God moves, and recognize that no man could have possibly hung stars. No man could possibly hang clouds, could plant trees so beautiful and so, vibrant, and could put the birds and perfectly place them. And no person could possibly, when you sit and realize that we're in the center of God at all times, and that dwells on the inside, it will fill you up, and it gives you something different to fight for. And it gave me hope. So I think sometimes we have to stop and ask ourselves, we're fighting. Everyone's fighting for something. People right now are fighting for freedom to go outside. For what? What are you fighting for? Be still. Be still. Just be still and ask yourself, what is it that you're really fighting for? And make a choice to fight for something that will create a win for you. Then everything makes sense. You'll hang in there, right? Because you'll realize, wait a minute, I can actually win at this thing. I might have to fight harder than I've ever fought in my life, but I can make it through.
I told you she was amazing. I told you.
I love that you just said, but I might have to fight the hardest I've ever fought in my life, because it's true. Right. I mean, and I had to do that twice. And then, with my kids, when I had to let go of blindness being an issue, and then I always say that the best advice that I can give moms is what happened to me. I didn't know what my kids were going to be able to do. All my dreams fell apart, and it was the greatest thing that ever happened.
Wow.
To take their dreams. I've been able to go, I don't know what he's going to do, but I'm going to get him what he needs. And the stuff you do now is unbelievable. And I'm like, take your dreams off of your kids. That's the best thing blindness did for me. But that was That was hard. That was so hard. And I hated blindness for a long time. Now I'm like, I mean, I never say it's a blindness or a curse. It's not anything. It just is. And my boys have been able to, I was, because I surrendered, was able to just look, I would say, look with hopeful eyes. That I was looking for the good and looking for what tools they needed and all that. And then they just went and did their thing. And I just turned them on. But it is hard. I mean, it could be the fight of your life, but it's so worth it.
Yeah, it's so worth it. You know what's so interesting you say that, because right when you were speaking, I was reminded, I remember it was 1997 or so. I've always been a huge Stevie Wonder fan, forever, ever, ever, absolutely love him. A friend of mine had this album, Inner Visions, and I listened to that album, and in that album, it deals with Stevie's heart. It's what Stevie can see that we can't see. And I'm telling you this because it introduced me to the idea that what mattered on the inside was so much more important than the things that I see with my eyes. Yeah. And it actually taught me to see and connect with people beyond what is there, what all the exterior things that we think matter so much. Your heart speaks so much louder. Your mind, all those things, when that alignment happens and you're able to see people, really see them in that way, that inner vision is so powerful.
Oh, yeah.
So your children have this inner vision and they're gifted with it. Their discernment.
Oh, geez. I get to experience that all the time. And I'll tell people, like when I do speeches and all, and I'll say my boys can tell in a handshake when they meet someone, and it doesn't happen often, but my Michael gets this weird body language when he can't trust somebody. And it's all in the first 30 seconds of him meeting them. So then people are like, is your son here? Am I going to be trustworthy? Like, is he going to?
We'll know in a minute. Yeah.
They don't have any of that bias. And it's absolutely extraordinary to have gone 20 years with them now, watching them have no bias that we have. And they just laugh at me all the time because they're like, you're so distracted and you have all this weird stuff that you focus on and you're not listening. And you're not hearing what the person's saying and all. It's funny. Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to just switch before, because we're going to have to, I hate to say we're going to have to wind this up soon because I could talk to you all night. But so tell us a little bit about the Grace podcast. We talked about the Great Girlfriends. Tell us how you put your faith out there in this podcast.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So, and that's my actual, I have to say, is my neglected baby. I'm actually overdue to put out a new episode. You know what? That's my last child. You know, the last one, 5 kids. Woo. So, but to your point of it. So the Grace podcast was put on my heart as another space to really share Christian perspective. And I got to tell you, it was the scariest thing I could have ever done. Because I'm not a pastor. Mm-hmm. I know the Lord. I love the Lord. I study the Bible, you know, all these things. But in my world, you had to be a pastor to be ordained. And you had to have a rite of passage before you could really share, you know, your heart for God, right? And so I struggled with that for months because I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? I'm not a pastor. I don't want anyone coming for me. And I had a conversation with God. And in that conversation with God, again, always level setting, I just heard, share your friendship with me. Just share what you've learned in your friendship with me. We're friends. I was like, oh, I can do that. I can share. We are homies. So
took all the pressure off. It just took it all right off.
The pressure was lifted. I just wanted to share my friendship with God and offer the opportunity for other people to take on friendship, relationship with God. Don't take on the church perception. Don't take on this proper thing, where you got to be so right and so perfect before you connect. Take on relationship. And so that podcast is dedicated to me introducing perspective through relationship with God, friends of God. What happens when you are a friend of God? What do you learn? How do you grow? What things are different for you? What's the lens that you take on as a friend of God? And how can you help other people around you without being a pastor or being so preachy, and just being love and light? What does that look like in a very human, practical way? So that's what the Grace podcast is about. And very interesting, I haven't posted a new podcast for that show since last year, but the listener base hasn't dropped. and it's changed from, it's no longer the same community. It's different communities in the US, but still the numbers are there. And people email me all the time asking about it. So I think this is a little bit of confirmation that I may need to revisit that show and kind of bring some more content to light, especially now because of where we are in the world.
People need it, right.
People need hope right now.
Well, you talk about that idea of a friendship with God, and it's terrible that that's a new idea to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it is, because we think of God as this, the Almighty, the All-Powerful, and whenever there's those all words, they're all this, they're all that. Well, I can't compete with that. So how can I have a relationship or a friendship with somebody? Most of the times I think we think of our friends as similar to us, or we have common characteristics or whatever, but you can't think about that with God. So the idea of sharing your friendship with God is just, it's a light filled idea. I love it.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's what grace is about. It's about understanding that we've been pardoned, right? So the stuff that we think disqualifies us from his presence has all been pardoned. That's the point of grace. That's the point of us having salvation, and the idea that salvation works allows us to have it. But I think a lot of times the missing piece for people is building just a friendship. Just because when you're friends with someone, you can just say, hey, you can just, share a silly moment. You can laugh, you can cry, you can do all these things and not feel like you have to put on a facade or qualify for their presence. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. You don't have to qualify.
We're already qualified.
God's happy you're telling me that, because I'm sure he's sitting there going, see, be a friend, Kristen. Stop yelling at me so much.
I love it.
I was like,
don't you yell at your friends?
Here? Right.
I yell at my friends sometimes. I'm like, hey, let's get it together. That's the joy of friendship, is that we can just be. And
those are the people you're the most comfortable with, the ones that you can share all those parts of yourself with.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, good.
So
yell at me even more now.
You and we must be like this, Kristen, like this.
I love it. You can't text God because he wouldn't answer you back.
It's all caps.
And Giphy, really mean Giphy she sends me too.
That is so funny. Oh my God.
I was having a breakdown and she's sending me Pee Wee Herman laughing. She thought
do you ever get the idea?
She tells me something awful that's happening, and I'm sending her Pee Wee Herman falling off a bike and laughing at her, which is...
I'm like, I'm stranded at the airport. Ha, ha, ha. It's so dumb that you did that. Ha, ha. And I'm like...
That is so funny. That's the thing. That's the point of a good relationship. It's like, you know what? All I have to offer you is Pee Wee. That's all.
That's it. That's all I got. That's all I got. I'm not coming to get you, so sorry.
That's so good.
Okay. So Sybil, tell everybody where we can find you, because I just know everybody's going to want more of you and what you have to offer, because it was just so light-filled and wonderful. So where can we find you?
Oh, thank you so much. So I'm on Instagram at Sybil, SYBIL _AMUTI. My website is SybilAmuti.com, and thegreatgirlfriends.com. You can there's over 200 episodes. Just dive in.
Yeah, that's a great show. I was delighted to have been on it. It was so genuine, and I enjoyed every moment of that. So,
and your story, I can still hear you today telling your story about your son. So I admire you and respect you so much.
Thank you. Oh. And that boy, as you knew, is married. He has 3 babies now.
Wow.
3 babies. Yeah.
Are you Nana or Grandma? Great. Or
my name is Mary Fran. They call me Franny.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah,
Franny.
we had Grandma was taken, Mama was taken. All the traditional names were taken by great grandparents and all this other stuff. So it ended up being Franny. So all the kids call me Franny, which is really cute. Nobody else will have that.
Cute. Yeah. That's right.
Flanny. That's what they call me. They can't say Franny. They call me Fwanny.
That's so cute. I love it. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And on the book. I see that book back there.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
There's
another one. It's another new one. And this book is actually the story of all of that went on with David. So you know that story, so you can appreciate it. Was not easy to write that book, but like you said, you just got to dive in sometimes.
Yeah. You're encouraging me.
Our program now. That's the meat and potatoes at the middle of our program now. So I'm so
glad
that happened to you, Mary Fran, because it's benefiting all of us now. Congratulations.
Yes. Keep going, ladies. Keep going. The world needs all of this. I'm telling you. Keep going.
We love your light and your presence and your joy and your faith that you share with us. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And everybody, this episode will be available so you can see it online on our YouTube channel. Check out our Facebook community, Brilliantly Resilient. And we will see you tomorrow with another show. Have a great night, everybody.
Awesome. Good night.